Jean Wong brings us 9 tales of the gods: Apollo, Hestia, Mercury, Venus, transformed into a modern vernacular. Here's Rosemary Manchester talking with Jean Wong and Sleeping with the Gods.
Your book is called Sleeping with the Gods, Immortal Stories by Jean Wong. I love it. I've been dying to ask you where the inspiration came. Well, from the gods, of course, but the inspiration for these, they're unusual stories.
Well, a lot of people are asking me, well, you must know a lot about, Greek and Roman gods, but to tell you the truth, I know nothing about, I've never been I did take 2 years of Latin, but other than that, I'm not some classical scholar of any kind. I'm in a Friday writing class in Sonoma, and we're assigned a topic. We assign each other a topic every week. Well, this particular week, someone assigned Mercury. And so I walk in the class, and some people had written on the element mercury, like in a thermometer or something like that. But one girl wrote about the god Mercury, and she described his characteristics. And as you know, Mercury is fast, he's changeable, not really very reliable, he can lie. And when she was describing him, I thought, I used to have a boyfriend just like that. And I just, and it was that kind of situation where you kind of meet someone and you kind of want it to work, and he's gorgeous and you like him, but he says or does something that you go, wait a minute, that was weird, or that's strange, but you want it to work. And so you just sort of keep. So anyway, that was the impetus. And then I wrote that one, and after that, I thought of Venus, and I thought of, another one, and I was on a roll.
You certainly were. Yeah. And for me, it really, really works to see how the various ways in which you work the stories around the characteristics of the gods and goddesses. I want to read to our audience what Terry Arrett wrote about your book. She says, "Sleeping with the Gods romps through the unexpected intersection of everyday life and myth. But not the myths you learned in school. Each god or goddess has a contemporary persona. Mercury is a beachcombing gigolo in Kauai. Venus is a hitchhiker along the Columbia River Gorge. Hestia is a caretaking android. Whether you're familiar with the classic tales or discovering the gods for the first time, you'll find these divine encounters engaging, humorous, haunting, sexy, and savvy, with deep insights into human nature."
That particular blurb was wonderful, and I often read it myself because not only is it glowing, but it also gives you – it's a hard book to sort of describe and explain to people, but it completely, in a nutshell, tells you what it's about.
You're doing a lot of readings. How's that going? What's it like?
It's fun. It's a lot of fun. I have one story in there especially that I enjoy so much. It takes place at the Zen Center. It's a total fiction, but I used to belong to the Sonoma Mountain Zen Center out here in Santa Rosa, and it's really my favorite story. And I find myself, keep reading it because I love reading it so much. But then I thought, there's a lot of stories I haven't read, so today I'm going to be reading it another venue, and so I'm gonna do Zeus. Zeus is another difficult story.
Yes.
It's the myth where Zeus transforms himself into a swan and rapes Leda. And this is extremely, Yeats wrote a very famous poem on it, and people have written on this many times, so it was particularly challenging for me because I was thinking, how on earth am I going to have Zeus be a contemporary dude, walking around, and how is he going to get himself to be a swan and rape somebody? Yeah. And also the subject of rape is sensitive.
Of course it is.
Women are, kind of a little nervous about that subject.
That's right.
I'm interested in how it's going to go today, whether people are going to go, yikes, and run, or whether they'll, be sympathetic to the way it was done.
I was a little nervous myself in approaching that story.
Well, the one thing that I hope I made clear in that was Zeus was just as much a victim of history and himself and his own karma as the person he victimized. In all of the stories, there were a lot of things where, especially the men, were not that sympathetic, but I wanted to make sure that you could see where they were coming from, and so that you felt that there was this sort of encounter between the divine and the human, but each had their own issues, and they each kind of ensnared and entrapped each other in a way, so, yeah.
And you captured the essence of the persona of each of them, and it made me reflect on the importance of those myths. Your book has, I think, a universal appeal, and I wanted to ask you, it's the gods and goddesses from the Greek and Roman mythology.
Right.
Who have stayed with us and who have more universal recognition.
Well, I think that what is appealing, these Greek and Roman gods had that human, frail, they always had some kind of little, Achilles heel, so to speak.
Achilles, there's another name we recognize. Yes.
They always had a certain weakness or a tendency to overdo it, or they blew it, or they pursued somebody and somebody turned into a tree, or, that kind of a thing. Yeah.
Right. So let me remind our listeners I'm talking to Jean Wong, and that her website is under her name, Jean Wong, and the name of the book is Sleeping with the Gods, Immortal Stories. Right. I want to tell you, Jean, how happy I am to find a smaller size book. It's complete. I want more, but this one is complete in itself, and it's easy to carry around. You can put it in your pocket. You can put it in your backpack. You can tuck it in under your pillow when you're reading it at night. I'm a terrific fan of smaller books. And I'm sure, did you deliberately set out to think, well, I'll keep this one small? It's how many pages? Is it 100?
It's 108 pages.
108
yeah,
pages.
Yeah.
Perfect.
But I didn't know. As a matter of fact, they were originally 6, and I was talking to one person who considered publishing it with his very small press, and he said, would you consider adding a couple more stories to give the collection a little more heft? I love that word, heft.
That's great.
And so I just pulled out 3 more stories out of the hat, which I'm really glad I did, because it really seemed to round things out. But I know what you're saying. I mean, this is a pretty shallow confession, but when I go to the library, oftentimes I will just look down the shelf and I'll pick the thinner volumes, mainly because I feel if somebody can't say something, it's going to take so long in this huge volume to say something. They're probably long-winded. There's a story to be told, and tell it.
Right.
For goodness sakes, just don't go on and on and on about it. And I feel that way even about biographies. I mean, unless you're doing really scholarly, comprehensive work, make it interesting. Keep the reader engaged.
Yes, and don't tell me everything.
Yeah, right. I don't need to know everything.
The same thing about memoir. Don't tell me everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think you'll do more with Gods and Goddesses?
I haven't actually thought of it. I'm actually working now on. I've written a lot of memoir pieces, but they're memoir pieces, unlike sort of your typical memoir, where it's just telling you about the life. Each one of, in fact, the name of the story, name of the title is going to be Do You See Me Here, which is the title of one of the stories, and then it'll say, Do You See Me Here, and Other Tales of Personal Folly. And the book will be divided up into things like mystery or insight or folly, or so the chapters will not, instead of a memoir where you sort of talk about your life and kind of these sequence of things that happen to you, each of them will be shaped as a story and stand out by itself. And it'll have, kind of like that, what a story needs, a kind of arc and a good ending, a surprise ending and everything. So in that way, it's a little bit different than your, da-da-da-da type memoir. Hopefully it won't be boring.
I would read that story. Yes.
I just finished an essay, which I Yeah, I just posted it actually last week on my blog, which is what is story? And the thing that really occurs to me most of all is that, if you get married and your husband cheats on you and you start drinking and then you commit suicide, that's not really a story. In other words, suffering is not your tales of woe are not a story. And I have lots of tales of woe, but that's not going to be interesting to anybody. In fact, it's a bummer to read about somebody's tale of woe, So how do you take situations like that and somehow, have maybe a tale of woe, but juxtapose it to another setting or something else where, one part of the puzzle, jumps across the room and fits into the other part of the puzzle and creates, a story, a real story, So,
now, how did you learn how to do that?
Well, that's what sometimes I think that there is such a thing as a muse because, like in the one with Andrew Ronan, the story that was one of my favorite, an incident happened to me in real life, which was a woe was me story, and I kept thinking, well, how am I gonna, da 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 da, and the puzzle did jump it, and I went, aha. So I think there is that kind of muse. People talk about that.
There's a muse.
There seems to be something that just sort of all of a sudden you go, there it is, as clear. And some of the things I've written, I can hardly believe that it was written by me. I mean, I'll look at it and I said, how did I cough that one up?
Jean, one of my favorite stories in the book is the first one about Mercury. And people who know me will know why I immediately glommed onto it, because it has a ukulele in it. Of course. He has a ukulele of Kona wood, and so do I. So I bonded with him immediately. But would you read a portion of the beginning of the story of Mercury?
Okay. And, of course, each story has a little description of the god there. And in the beginning, Mercury, it says, Mercury, the messenger god, who wore winged sandals. He made a lyre, filched cattle, and is known for thievery. Later, after Kailani gave it some thought, she realized it was impossible. He couldn't have come out of the ocean with a ukulele in his hand. But that's how she remembered him. The sun behind him like a halo, salt water dripping down the instrument's soft koa wood. Recently divorced, she was licking her wounds on the shores of Kauai, sprawled longer than was comfortable in the hot sun, trying to read a book with a drink that had grown warm. This is what she'd yearned for, but it seemed unlikely that even the gods could have sent her someone so utterly handsome, creamy golden tan, thick bundles of blonde locks, eyes that shimmered with facets of blue and green. Was there even an occasional flare of violet? He plopped himself down beside her. She waited for the pickup line. Do you have the time? Can I borrow a match? Weren't you at the party last night? Do you play? He proffered the ukulele, his long, tapered fingers wrapped around the instrument's neck. He smiled with such immediacy and confidence she was certain his overtures towards women were never turned down. Kailani was probably one of the few people that day on the beach who did indeed know how to play, and she eerily sensed that was why he had approached her. Cradling the small, figure-8-shaped ukulele in one arm, she strummed Kekale Nehau, the Hawaiian wedding song, the most beautiful and famous song of the islands. Their eyes locked, as if in a ceremony between them had already taken place. In rare harmony, they sang the final lines. Ele, ele, oi now, ele, oi now. You play well. You sing well, she replied. Where are you from? I'm a planet unto myself, he smiled. But looking at you, it's hard to remember where I ever was or will be.